Have you seen The Name of the Rose?
Within these walls, men come to seek God. He has come to seek a killer.
We found the body horribly mutilated under a window which was found closed. Somebody told me.
What happens when you mix Sherlock Holmes with Father Jacques? Well, technically you get Father Brown, but that's not who we're talking about. We're talking about Sean Connery's William of Baskerville. Oh my God. I just realized that's a play on the Hounds of Baskervilles. Oh, God, that's just so lazy. Anyways, yeah, I got to get back into it. Anyways, Sean Connery's William of Baskerville is a Franciscan monk who was hired by an abbot who runs the monastery somewhere in northern Italy after a young illuminator, a person who paints pictures in medieval texts, appears to have committed suicide even though the window from where he fell can't be opened and the glass isn't shattered. Along with Sean Connery's William in this journey is Azzo, William's aide and mentee, played by Christian Slater. This movie is so hard to judge. It's so hard to review. It feels like a movie that you want to say is a 10, but it's not, and it feels wrong to say anything less. The acting is phenomenal. The editing could use work. And the story at times felt like it needed to be honed or have something added into it to make it perfect. This is the type of movie that if it hit home, it would have been a 10 for generations. But because it just whiffed it won't be in anybody's top 10 list and will probably be forgotten about in 30 years. So before we start jumping into the review and getting a little nitpicky about what held this movie back from being a 10, let's mention the director, the writer, the cast, and a little bit of neat stories behind the camera. And like always, this is where the review begins if you wish to jump ahead.
My dear Agile, it's elementary.
Jean-Jacques Annaud, which I hope I said that correctly, was born in occupied France during World War II and is 81 years old and still alive today. His film career surprisingly isn't long, movie making wise, not year wise, since 1976 with his first release Black and White in Color, a World War I anti-military movie about the French invasion of German colony Cameroon, to his last movie Notre Dame on Fire, a disaster movie about the near destruction of Notre Dame. Released in 2022, he's only made 14 movies, 17 total projects though. Now, out of those 14 movies, many of them are what would be considered fantastic, if not terrific movies. Many of his movies are what I described earlier as whiffed movies. Movies that were so close to being perfect that only the slightest of things kept them out of being a top 10 movie. As I mentioned before, his first movie was Black and White in Color, which was released in 1976. From there, Mr. Annaud would release a movie about every 3 years. The next movie in English is called Hothead. That was released in 1979. In 1981, a major movie that helped launch a fairly now well-known actor, Ron Perlman, was released called Quest for Fire. This would be followed up 5 years later, the biggest gap in Mr. Annaud's career, with The Name of the Rose, which would be followed quickly by The Bear. Now, what I didn't mention about all those movies was the number of awards that he won for them. For the movie Hothead, John Belushi, a French actor, won the César Award for Best Actor and Supporting Role for his performance. For Quest of Fire, they won an Academy Award and a BAFTA for Best Makeup. A César or Caesar Award for Best Film and Best Director, and won countless awards at the Genie Awards. The Bears list is just too long to even talk about, and The Name of the Rose scored Sean Connery a BAFTA for Best Actor and Hasso von Hugo for Best Makeup Artist. So from that, we know he's a talented director who, if he's not being showered with praise, people he's working with are. Now, we move over to the 90s for Mr. Annaud, which was a little more uneventful. Out of his 3 movies, one was showered with praise, another ignored completely, and the last one caused an international incident. The Lover, released in 1992, won the Motion Sound Editor's 1993 Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing for Foreign Feature, And yes, that is the full title, and was nominated for 7 Caesar Awards in France and the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. The second film, Wings of Courage, which sounds like a cheesy 80s song, it exists, and there was no love for that movie, and I don't think anybody talks about it. And the last movie Mr. Anood made in the 90s was 1997's 7 Years in Tibet, a movie that honestly didn't get a lot of praise or awards, but absolutely made the Chinese hot under the collar. They banned Mr. Anood, Brad Pitt, and David Thewlis from their country. Of course, they would all make up over time, except maybe for Thewlis. There's no mentioning of him being in friendly terms with them or not. By having Mr. Anood return to China as a judge in 2012, the Shanghai Film Festival, and Brad Pitt has returned at least twice in 2014 and 2016. Also, they banned Sony from showing any movies in their country for a year before Sony had to do an apology tour in Japan with Chinese officials, host the Chinese film directors on their lots, and lobby for China to become a World Trade Organization member. And that's what you get for showing the Chinese Communist Party incorrectly. Now let's speed run the last few movies while skipping over his most popular one, which we'll talk about last. In 2004, he came out with the movie Two Brothers, well received but no rewards. Then in 2007, His Majesty Minor, his lowest ranking movie, hated by all even though it's original. Then in 2011, Black Gold, or also called Day of the Falcon. Critics decried it for being too long and tedious. Then in 2015, we have Wolf Totem, a Chinese movie. And in 2022, we have Mr. Anod's last movie, Notre Dame on Fire. Now let's backtrack to Mr. Anod's most famous movie, which many people will debate as either the best sniper movie or even, in some cases, the best World War II movie. And that's Enemy at the Gates. Enemy at the Gates enthusiasts may be shocked to find out that this movie released in 2001, and it was ripped to shreds by critics. Many critics cited that the movie was inaccurate, that it glorified war, and some other blah blah blah. I do wonder how film critics of yesteryear would look upon critics who review war movies today, who don't give a hoot about accuracy. But not only did this movie get ripped to shreds by critics, it also didn't win a single award or any film festivals, and was booed by the Germany movie critics at Berlinale, and was petitioned by the Red Army veterans to be removed from Russian theaters. And the worst thing, the movie didn't even turn a profit. And all I could think is, how lucky is the guy to create 2 international incidents in his own lifetime? 4 writers worked on this movie, which in my opinion is 3 too many. Those writers were Andrew Birkin, Gerard Brock, Howard Franklin, and Alan Goder. Now, there's nothing really definitive about how this movie was written, or who was hired first, or who inked the original screenplay. But based on Anod's and 2 of the other writers, I believe that Alan Goder and Gerard Brock were brought in by Anod to help put the script more into his forte. Reason for that belief is because of the extensive history that both writers share with Anod. Alan Goder's whole career basically is nothing but Anod films. Working with him began in 1979 with Hothead, and basically every movie after that. He worked on Quest for Fire, Name of the Rose, The Wings of Courage, Enemy at the Gates, Two Brothers, Black Gold, and most recently 2015's Wolf Totem. Now, when it comes to Gerard Brock, he has a history that doesn't just include Anod, but does become saturated with his movies after working together on 1981's Quest for Fire. But before that, a little bit after Anod, Brock wrote movies such as Repulsion, The Two of Us, Seeking Asylum, Maria's Lovers, and Pirates. And after the team up in 1981, he would work with Anod on projects like The Bear, The Lover, and His Majesty's Minor. So basically everything else that Goddard didn't write. And when we come back to our other 2 writers, Andrew Birkin and Howard Franklin, they don't cross paths with Anod like ever again. And Howard Franklin, though, if I had to guess, probably wrote the original screenplay, mainly because the only movie he has on his resume that he didn't get credit for, by the way, was Romancing the Stone, and that was mainly for script revisions. After The Name of the Rose, he has worked on, I guess you could say, maybe a good number of films, those being Someone to Watch Over, Quick Change, Larger Than Life, The Man Who Knew Too Little, and most recently, The King of 7B. And to solidify my belief that Howard Franklin probably wrote the screenplay, we come over to Andrew Birkin. Has a longer resume, or at least when this movie came out, he did. And he had a decent resume, depending on who you ask. And he also worked on a few medieval time period movies, those being King David, The Messenger, A Story of Joan of Arc, and Pied Piper. But I kind of get the feeling that Birkin was brought in to help shape up the story, then was kept on when Anand was hired, and he also plays a small part in the movie as Cuthbert of Winchester, who I believe was a minor priest who begs Connery's character to leave the monastery when the Inquisitors was said to be coming. But yeah, that's our 4 writers and their writing history. The cast of this movie is a pretty stellar cast, and everyone's acting was well up to snuff, especially Sean Connery's. Interesting tidbits, Sean Connery's career at this point was in a downward spiral. Well, not a complete downward spiral. This movie brought him back to mainstream media, and he would follow this movie up with, you know what, I'll save it for the next 15 seconds when I begin talking about him. Sean Connery in the lead role plays William of Baskerville, an obvious nod to Sherlock Holmes and Arthur Conan Doyle. At this point in Sean Connery's career, he was the aging golden star that had built a career out of playing James Bond, but many of his other movies were falling flat. People began to believe he was typecast and couldn't do much outside of Bond. If you look at the last 10 years leading up to this movie, from 1976 to 1986, he had a lot of shining stars, but the duds were deafening. Movies that he shined in, or were at least well reviewed, was Robin and Marianne, Circassia, A Bridge Too Far, The Great Train Robbery, Outland, Time Bandits, and Never Say Never Again. And you can't really consider Circassia a movie, as it was only 11 minutes long. The slip-ups, though, really harmed his career and made everyone, including the writer of this book, The Name of the Rose, question if he was still a good actor. Those movies were The Next Man, Meteor, Cuba, Wrong is Right, and The Sword of the Valiant. Now, in the same year as this movie's release, he came out with another movie that wasn't as mainstream beloved, but has a massive cult following, Highlander. Sean Connery, though, was able to squeeze out another 2 decades of acting after this movie before a slip-up devastated his career. And he would pass away basically after destroying his career, 8 years after destroying his career, in 2020 at the age of 90. Christian Slater as Azo of Melk. Slater's career began with a few appearances in TV soap operas, like a 22 episode appearance in Ryan's Hope, and a TV movie, Pardon Me for Living. But in 1985, Slater made his big debut in film with his movie The Legend of Billie Jean, starring Helen Slater, which I assume there's no relation, and Twisted, a thriller horror movie where he plays the bad guy. Within the next year, young Slater was chosen in a wide audition of boys for the role of Azo. Now, this outcome may have been influenced by his mother, who is a prominent casting director, but he proved himself in the movie that nepotism may have impacted the outcome, but not his performance. From there, Slater would build out his career in TV and movies, many of them duds, which would harm his career's trajectory. But the few times that he has shown his chops, he was beloved. And within the last 10 years, Slater has finally begun to pull himself up from his C-tier acting into a more respectable B-tier with performances in Mr. Robot, Dr. Death, Archer, and Inside Job. Helmut Qualtinger as Remigio de Veragine, but Mr. Qualtinger had quite a career in his home country of Austria and in the surrounding other countries. Mr. Qualtinger had, I assumed, a successful career on stage, film, and TV. He appeared in movies such as King of the Ring, The Abyss and Mr. Gerstenberg, The Beautiful Liar, Man in the Shadow, Mr. Carl, The Raspberry Picker, The Boer Case, Friend and Foe, and Short Process. And these are all names that I translated from the natural German to English using Google, so they're probably all wrong. But Mr. Qualtinger would begin to hit his stride in the latter half of his career. appearing beside American and British actors as well in movies like The Castle, End of the Game, The Wrong Weight, Dowry, Alpensaga, and Tales from the Vienna Woods. In 1986, though, he would pass away from complications of liver disease before The Name of the Rose would be released, his most noteworthy movie. Michael Lonsdale as the Abbot. Michael Lonsdale's career began when he was 24 years old in It Happened in Aden, in a very small role. From there, he would spend the next decade toiling away in minor roles, slowly building up his career before receiving his first major critical acclaim in 2 films by Francois Truffaut, The Bride Who Wore Black and Stolen Kisses. Though primarily active in French cinema, Mr. Lonsdale, being bilingual, made occasional but often memorable forays into the English language productions. His first as a reporter in Fred Zinnemann's Behold a Pale Horse. Subsequent parts have included a title landowner who sets in motion the caravan to Veracruz, a CIA agent in Enigma, and a Swiss banker in Holcroft Covenant. James Ivory cast him in 2 of his films consecutively as a French delegate in The Remains of the Day and as King Louis XVI Jefferson in Paris. By and large, it is for his powerhouse performance as Roger Moore's megalomaniac antagonist Sir Hugo Drax in Moonraker, for which Lonsdale is likely to be most remembered. He received a BAFTA nomination for his role in The Day of Jackal, but only received major acting honors in 2011, winning the Caesar Award as the Best Supporting Actor for Of Gods and Men. Ron Perlman as Salvatore, the multilingual madman. Ron Perlman's career began surprisingly in the same place as Christian Slater's on Ryan's Hope. But he would gain his first prominent acting role, and almost actually his first acting role, in Anoud's Quest for Fire. He would take off time before following up that movie with one of my personal favorites, Ice Pirates, in 1984. He would take 2 years off learning for this role in order to speak just like Salvatore, a rambling madman who spoke 6 languages. After his stellar performance in The Name of the Rose, he would snag a beloved 80s TV show, Beauty and the Beast, playing the Beast for 55 episodes. He would snag a few more movies and TV shows along the way, but never really becoming a bankable star. He would go on to meet Del Toro, who would eventually become a very close friend of his, on the set of the movie Kronos. He would also lend out his voice for the animated projects like The Legend of Prince Valiant, Batman the Animated Series as Clayface, Bonkers, and Phantom 2040. Of course, he also had appearances in beloved movies and TV shows, even if sometimes it was only by a very few, like Alien Resurrection, Titan A&E, and Blade 2. But he didn't hit mainstream cult following until 2004's Hellboy, when he teamed up with his longtime friend and collaborator Del Toro. And from there, still not an A-list tier. Even when he was securing roles in Scooby-Doo, Batman, and several of his iterations, Teen Titans as Slade, and the narrator of the Fallout series, Halo 2 as Lord Hood, he just never broke that ceiling. Even at the height of his career in Sons of Anarchy, he just never got through that glass. Now, that doesn't mean he won't give you a stellar performance or even be memorable, or that he doesn't get a lot of work, which he gets a ton of jobs every year. He just won't be a mainline attraction for a movie or possibly even a TV series. Fedor Chaplin Jr. as Jorge de Burgos, son of world Russian opera basso Fedor Chaplin Sr., Chaplin Jr. wished to grow out of his father's shadow and become a star in his own right. So sometime in the early 1920s, Chaplin moved to Hollywood to pursue a career in acting. He appeared in silent movies such as Into Her Kingdom, Volga Volga, and The Ship of the Lost Souls, before finally landing his first uncredited role in a spoken sound movie of Lancer Spy. From there, he would get more roles as uncredited characters before landing one of his earliest memorable roles as Kashkin, where he dies in the arms of Gary Cooper in For Whom the Bells Toll. But Chaplin's career would never thrive in Hollywood as he scraped and played small, uncredited characters. So, starting sometime in the 50s, he moved to his forever home of Rome, Italy. From there, he was able to play a broad array of very different characters, ranging from comic gem as Senator Torcello in a political satire, The Erotistus, to a sinister Professor Arnold in the horror film Inferno. He did, though, in the 80s return to Hollywood and make a comeback in his latter years. He is probably best known for his role as the loony dog walking grandfather in Moonstruck. He also enjoyed a fine part as Leonard Cox, Robert De Niro's father, in Stanley and Iris. His last notable role was as Professor Bartnev in The Inner Circle, based on a true story about people suffering in Soviet Russia under the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin. Chaplin would pass away at the age of 86 in 1992. And finally, Valentina Vargas as the girl. This was one of her first roles, just like her paramour in this, Christian Slater, but she has a lengthy-ish film career with a few episodes also on TV. Her most famous roles are this movie and Hellraiser Bloodline. Her most recent outings, though, have been for an episode in Heroes. I think it's an Italian miniseries from 2007, to Mea Culpa in 2009, and a few appearances in movies like All Inclusive, Faces in the Crowd, and Night Across the Street. So, not really a thriving career. Also, sorry for not going in more depth, but she really doesn't have a history after 2000. Franciscan friar William of Baskerville and his novice Adzo of Melk arrive at an early 14th century Benedictine abbey in northern Italy. A mysterious death has occurred ahead of an important theological church conference. A young illuminator appears to have committed suicide. William, known for his deductive and analytical mind, confronts the worried abbot and gains permission to investigate the death.
Oh, I see. And because you can offer no natural explanation, your monks suspect the presence of a supernatural force within these walls.
That's why I need the counsel of an acute man such as you, Brother William.
Over the next few days, several other bizarre deaths occur. William and Adzo make the acquaintance of Salvatore, a hunchback who speaks gibberish in various languages, and his handler and protector, Remigio. William deduces from Salvatore's use of the term, this word, that he had once been a member of the heretical sect and fears that Salvatore and Remigio may have been involved in the killings. Meanwhile, Adzo encounters a peasant girl who snuck into the abbey to trade sexual favors for food and seduces him and has sex with him. Investigating, William and Adzo deduce that the blackened fingers and tongues of the dead monks are in some way connected with a book which has gone missing, which they endeavor to find before more monks are killed. Keen to head off accusations of the murders being the work of the devil,
Fall in fountain of water.
Do not squander the last 7 days!
the protagonists discover and explore a labyrinthine library in the abbey's forbidden principal tower. William finds that one of the greatest libraries in all of Christendom, containing dozens of works by classical masters such as Aristotle. Thought to have been lost for centuries, William deduces that the library is kept hidden because such advanced knowledge coming from a pagan philosopher is difficult to reconcile with Christianity. His investigations are curtailed by the arrival of Bernardo Gui of the Inquisition, summoned for the conference keen to prosecute those he deemed responsible for the deaths. William and Bernard have clashed in the past, and the zealous inquisitor has no time for his theories outside of his own. Salvatore and the girl are found fighting over a black cockerel while in the presence of a black cat. Gui presents this as irrefutable proof that they are in league with Satan and tortures Salvatore into a false confession. Salvatore, Remigio, and the girl are dragged before a tribunal where Gui intimidates the abbot into concurring with the judgment of the heresy. But William, also invited by Gui to serve on the panel of judges, refuses to confirm the accusations of murder, pointing out that the murderer could read Greek.
For Brother Remigio cannot read Greek. And this entire mystery hinges on the theft and possession of a book written in Greek and hidden in some secret part of the library.
A skill that Remigio doesn't possess. Gui resorts to extracting a confession from Remigio by threat of torture and clearly plans to take care of William for good. When the head librarian succumbs like the others, William and Adzo ascend the forbidden library and come face to face with the venerable Jorge, one of the oldest monks in the abbey, with the book they have been searching for. William deduces that the book is the only remaining copy of Aristotle's second book of Poetics, which describes how comedy and how it may be used to teach. Believing laughter to be the instrument of the devil, Jorge has poisoned the pages to stop the spread of what he considers dangerous ideas. Those reading it would ingest the poison as they lick their fingers to aid in turning pages. Confronted, Jorge throws over a candle, starting a blaze that quickly engulfs the library. William assists the Azo as he manages to collect the inadequate armload of invaluable books to save. The volume of poetics, Jorge and the rest of the library are lost. Meanwhile, Salvatore and Remigio have been burned at the stake. The girl has been slated for the same fate, but local peasants take advantage of the chaos of the library fire to free her and turn on Gui. Gui attempts to flee, but they throw his wagon off the cliff to his death. William and Azo later take their leave of the abbey. On the road, Azo is stopped by the girl, silently appealing for him to stay with her, but Azo continues on with William. In his closing narration, a much older Azo reflects that he never regretted his decision, as he learned many more things from William. Azo also states that the girl was the only earthly love of his life, and yet he never even learned her name.
Yet I never knew, nor ever learned her name.
Like I mentioned before, this movie is very hard to review because of how great the acting is, but falterings do bring the movie down. But it doesn't make you feel good to point them out. So let me point them out and show you what brings this movie down from a 10 to an 8 or even a 7. Number 1, editing. I keep thinking I was watching a cut created by Peacock, because that's where I watched it, because there are absolute hard cuts ever so often that ruin the flow of the movie. One such cut happens when Christian Slater's Azo is chasing Salvatore after he tried to hit William with a huge rock. It was either poorly filmed or poorly edited, because I had no idea who was chasing who and why it kept cutting back and forth, which I assume was 2 or 3 different takes mashed together, and how other movies would have just created a seamless flow by following Connery as he followed Slater and Perlman, who are running along some scaffolding. It was just poorly edited scene that breaks your immersion. Luckily, I don't believe there's another scene like that, but there are moments where they cut between action and talking, or action and Slater getting it on, that don't flow well. Number 2, the sex scene. Just super gratuitous, completely not needed, and oddly placed. I mean, maybe it's the same way in the book, but Connery and Slater's characters are looking for someone who just ran out of the library with evidence. They split up in order to cover more ground, and Slater's character goes into some storage room and he hides when he hears someone threatening what he thought was him. And instead, after the man leaves, he meets a pretty girl in the storage room who begins to sleep with him, with no spoken dialogue that goes on for way too long. And it doesn't fit the suspenseful moment that we're having. It didn't make any sense. It took away from the story. Now, I know that the movie and the book is kind of about her, the title is at least, and I suppose that we were going to have this moment, but it didn't flow. It felt very clunky and out of place, especially when it kept cutting back to Sean Connery, who was still investigating. But I will say, as much as I thought the scene went on too long and was shoehorned in a little awkwardly, it did lead to an enjoyable moment between William and Azo, where the latter confesses to his sins. I highly enjoyed the interaction between Connery and whoever he was speaking with, but especially with Slater. I could have watched a 2-hour movie of them walking around a monastery, doing mundane tasks and talking about God. That's just how good Sean Connery was in elevating everyone around him. Number 3, the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor is just a cartoon villain. There's no humility, there's no humbleness to him, just arrogance and self-assertiveness. Now, I would have been more open to the Inquisitor being portrayed like this if everyone in the monastery was treated and known as outcasts. That everyone in the monastery is, child peddlers, fringe radicals, homosexuals, it's the 14th century, science believers, etc., etc. That everyone has been banished by the Catholic Church. But maybe they have too much influence, or they don't want to tarnish the church's image through excommunication, so they ship them out to secluded monasteries. And that is one of the driving fears for everyone in the monastery, is that, someday an inquisitor is just going to come there and start executing. And why they so desperately wanted William to solve the case instead of contacting the church. But you have to really read in between the lines to get that feeling, because the movie doesn't just outright say it. So when the Inquisitor arrives, he's worse than the Disney villain. And his death at the end of the movie also didn't feel right. Like, the movie really wanted me to see him as a villain, but I saw him more as an obstacle that was preventing the movie from telling me a compelling murder mystery. And there was a few moments where I enjoyed the court case where he wants to label everybody a witch. I did enjoy that, but the whole time he was there, he didn't bring anything to the movie. He didn't cause the story to speed up or slow down or change course. Sean Connery still figured out who did the murder mystery. The church would have still been burnt to the ground because the guy would have still knocked over the candle and set all the books on fire. So it didn't play any part in the story. He was just an obstacle. Number 4, the ending. The ending to this movie drags it down, which is the massive issue with most movies, that the endings never live up to the build-up. The grand reveal that the blind monk was the one murdering people and that his henchman, the assistant librarian, also played a part in murdering people, didn't surprise me one iota. It was obvious, the definition of obvious. And the reveal that the Book of Humor was why he did what he did was also revealed fairly early on in the movie. First with the Moorish guy laughing as he read the book, and the second when Connery's character debated the blind monk over humor and how God gave us laughter. They really drove it home when they announced the actual book's title that they were debating over, which was the murder mystery book.
And yet, Aristotle devoted his second book of Poetics to comedy as an instrument of truth.
You have read this work?
No, of course not. It's been lost for many centuries.
But the obvious reason why I don't like the ending isn't because of the library burning down. All throughout history, the information and the art of man is usually the first thing subject to destruction. What I didn't like was the huge green glob of poison that they slapped on the side of the book to show you that, oh, look, there's poison. Leading up to this point, I had a firm belief that the priest, when he could see, wrote, or illuminated the copy of the Poetics and used arsenic in the paint and the ink to ensure that no one in the future would be able to read it and pass on the information, that everyone would eventually pass away from ingesting the arsenic, or at least get very ill if they didn't lick their fingers when changing pages, which seems like a major loophole in your plan to poison people. I don't lick my finger when turning the pages. Why do I want spit on my book? So, yeah, that's why when they first revealed arsenic, like in probably the first 30 or so minutes of the movie, that there must have been arsenic in the ink on every word and picture, dooming anyone reading with their finger or admiring the artwork. Not licking the pages, just simply rolling your finger across it. Simply having a little bit of liquid would activate the arsenic. But no, instead we were given this huge amount of green toothpaste-like substance, which is like obvious. And are you telling me everyone died that way while looking at the big green gob? And everyone was like, oh, that's fine. We have that on all our books. Also, like I mentioned before, I don't think they should have killed the Inquisitor. He was a sideshow obstacle that didn't play any major role in the movie outside of shaming Sean Connery and trying to burn 3 people to death. 3 people that, in historical context, had it coming, and more than likely, most people wouldn't have stopped them being burned alive. Also, he was based on a real historical person that didn't die like that, and it felt like it was a swing at the Inquisition, either by the director or by Umberto, who wrote the book. It just felt like he was shaming them of their past, which they can't control. Also, a quick note, it's not really a knockdown. It's just something that I thought of. Why did Connery's character have scientific instruments? In the beginning, he goes out of his way to hide them from the abbot, but they're never brought up again except for one more instance when he's staring out the window with his giant golden disc. It would have been interesting to use that source of information against William's heresy during the trial of the Dolomites and the witchcraft claim. You know, like, oh, you can't trust him because he's a man of science. But it's never brought up again. It's never mentioned again. It's never shown again. It's just like, why do we have it in the movie then? This just feels like a movie that really needs like a 3-hour director's cut to really help the story out here and there. But outside of that, the rest of the movie was fine, if not great. The ending with the church burning to the ground and William struggling over what to save, which I could completely feel that, and even Adzo turning back before riding away, I loved all that. You know, I loved all the talking. I love all the mystery, even though it was pretty obvious from somebody who's never read the book and first time watching the movie. I was kind of like, oh yeah, the bad guys are so obvious. So those points really drag down what could have easily been a 10, but definitely doesn't slide down past a 7. You know, it's like a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10, in my opinion. Great movie. I highly recommend anybody and everybody give it a watch. You can watch it on Peacock or, you know, just go out and buy it. But you guys have a good one. Bye.